We the people unite.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Be the People.
Hi, how you doing tonight?
How's everybody doing?
We the
Good,
people
good,
Hey.
unite.
Just a reminder to everybody, we are not politicians. We are not journalists. We are citizens who care. So we talk, we question, we learn. Most importantly, we stand together, right?
Right.
Yes.
All right. Welcome to Protest Week, leading up to the main event. So we're doing something a little bit different today. Today's content is really meant to be informational, educational, and hopefully a little inspirational. Because as I think about what it is we're fighting for, sometimes, our history gets lost in that. Sometimes people don't remember or didn't listen in history class or forget some of the struggles that we've gone through in this country. So we've been here before. This time is different. So I thought we'd take a little trip back in history and then pose some questions as we go. It's not a deep dive. It's just kind of remember this and what does that mean as it relates to what we're going through today, because it's all connected. So the first thing I want to put up, because we the people. This is how we came to create this community, to stand for democracy, because we believe in our Constitution. And we all know, we've talked about this. Our nation is not perfect, right? So when our nation began, and it wasn't born perfect, but it was born hopeful. The idea that ordinary people could govern themselves was really a radical idea, almost impossible. But our founding fathers believed in it anyway. And so we, the people, didn't describe who we were. It actually describes who we could become. And that's, again, an idea. And we're coming up on our 250-year birthday around that. So I just wanted to, let's just take a little trip down our history, if we remember our American history. Just some images, some paintings that I pulled back. A lot of this is in the Library of Congress. Remember the Tea Party, right? The American Revolution. What did this country, this idea is what our founding fathers fought for, and came together as a people to write the Constitution and the document that we are supposed to live from today. Our government is supposed to, and that's what's in jeopardy right now. So let me play this. How many of you know who Ken Burns is? Documentarian, fabulous documentarian. Has quite a few documentaries on PBS. He's done a lot of work around, I'll show two clips today, but this one was on the American Revolution that I think is coming out pretty soon.
From a small spark kindled in America, a flame has arisen, not to be extinguished.
We think about independence movements of the 20th century. You don't always recognize the fact that the United States actually started that.
The American Revolutionary Movement served as a model for freedom from oppression.
America is predicated on an idea that tells us who we are, where we came from, and what our forebears were willing to die for.
Collins said no taxation without representation. The fear was, if we give in to this precedent, what will they do in the future?
crisis changes people. It gave different people different ideas about what they should be doing.
It gave them a space to make this democracy real.
The founders thought we can start over again. We can begin the world anew.
The British objective is to suppress the rebellion, force them to acknowledge the authority of the king.
Washington understands the war he's fighting. He doesn't have to win. He only has not to lose.
He becomes quite eloquent in trying to persuade people we're all Americans.
We see regiments with individuals who are not carrying arms, doing essential labor, including women.
They are at the forefront of this movement.
One of the most remarkable aspects is that you had such different places come together as one nation.
It mushrooms into a global campaign that touches Europe and all parts of the world.
It so excites us that we are the product of a revolutionary moment where the world turned upside down.
To believe in America is to believe in possibility.
Yeah, amazing.
That was pretty good.
Yeah, his documentaries are phenomenal. So the question I want to pose to the group is what are your earliest memories of learning about the origins of our country? And how has that understanding of those founding ideals changed over time? Who wants to go first?
I started learning about it first, I would say, at school, and at the religious organization I was involved in, not really talking about politics, but like ways of the world. And so, but they were, they were not together. They weren't congruent. So it was a little, I was curious. But back then they did try to teach us that.
Oops. I'll go on from there.
Sorry, I went out, but I learned a lot.
Okay,
but now what I know and what I learned don't match either.
Expand on that. Okay, well, we'll come back to you, Anitra. I think Keisha, you had.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. Honestly, I thought about this question. I don't have early memories, and I think it's because I was bored. The way that it was explained to me I found it unrelatable. And I realized later that a bunch of it was lies and just a bunch of bullshit, because it was framed from a perspective that wasn't necessarily the truth. And it favored, it favored a story that centered only white people, ignored the Native American contributions and presence, and the same for the enslaved Africans and actually people who were already here.
That's a good point. And Burns usually in his documentaries, he covers all aspects. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm really anxious to watch this one.
Yeah.
Civil War is another one we're going to look at, but very true. And our history is filled with that.
Mm-hmm.
Our history is not our complete history.
That's interesting to me because I had good history teachers in high school, but going onward to what Keisha just said, I never knew that George Washington had slaves. I never knew Jefferson had slaves. It was rampant.
Mm-hmm.
So that feels bad. Of course it does. And you're right. That wasn't taught in our history classes. And I can't say my family ever shared that with me. Yeah, I just have to share that. It's hard.
I don't even know if our family knew some of that information. You know, again, with the indigenous people being here and with the Spanish American people already being here, and then the slaves coming under the, you know, in the bottom of the slave ships. And so, but no, my understanding was the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. And then I didn't learn all that I've learned today until I'll say in the past 10 years. I found out everything I learned in school was not true.
I feel like what we learned, because my earliest memories, of course, are elementary school, where they simplified a lot of things. Plymouth Rock, the Pilgrims, the first Thanksgiving, things like that. You did hear about the taxation with no representation, and it's not fair, you know, Schoolhouse Rock. I had my eyes opened a little bit early, though, because when I was about 12 or 13 is when Alex Haley's Roots came out. And I took a deep dive into that as a preteen. And so I started asking a lot of questions, and my parents filled me in on a lot of stuff that they weren't teaching us in school. So again, like Keisha said, at an early age, I found out that history is not really being taught in our schools. Not all of the history. It's like an outline that glorifies the birth of our nation, when in reality, you know, we were kind of rotten from the core from the very beginning, and we just haven't dealt with that.
I will agree with that as well. However, it depended on your social studies teacher, because some social studies teacher really did dive into it and really gave out the truth, and made us go and do our homework and really not only take his story, but find out what the true story was. So it depended on your social studies teacher for us, for me at least.
Yeah, same here. I think my generation, we were all taught, you know, pretty much the same stories. Very much. Oh, here you got it. Okay. Yeah, very much different today when we peel back the onion and we learn a little bit more. My add-on question to that then is, so does that make our country less worth fighting for?
No. It's just we still like democracy. That's the one thing I can say I do like. And I was, you know, excited about Martin Luther King, you know, when I learned about him and the fact that he wanted red, yellow, black, and white children to come out and hold hands and play and grow together in this country. I didn't know that was the myth. Now I know why he was saying that, because we were not equal.
Yeah, I firmly believe in the promise of our country. And so I believe that's worth fighting for. And it's something that we've been fighting for almost since the inception of our country, is the promise of our country.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether the Declaration of Independence or even the Constitution was written with Indigenous people or Black people in mind, it was still the promise made to the entire United States of America.
Hey, Kim. Sorry to interrupt with business, but something's going on with the stream. I'm not able to load the show on YouTube. And I know August said she had the same issue, even though it comes up intermittently. So is everything, I just want to make sure everything's good with the StreamYard.
Yeah, it looks good from here.
Yeah, I was having problems loading it too.
I have noticed also that the internet was very slow today, even when I was getting into my Instagram and
Error
other.
occurred.
Yeah.
I don't think put it on May Money show that I was having problems too with that list of Trump's list of wrongs and rights he was doing, and I think we on their list.
I think it's a YouTube issue because I was trying to watch another video while we were backstage. I saw a video that I was trying to watch and it wouldn't come. It just kept circling and circling. I think it might be a YouTube problem.
Okay.
You think they're trying to disrupt the No King's Day?
It could just be that YouTube was having server issues, but I think we can go on. I just wanted to make sure everything was good with the StreamYard.
Well, it also records, so
yeah,
we can also load it up. Tech, my life, love, hate relationship, as always.
Okay.
So I would agree. I think foundationally our Constitution is still one of the best in the world from the idea point of it and the hope of it and the way that we the people can continue to grow it and make it better and more inclusive and all those things. And one of the things that Benjamin Franklin did quote at the convention way back then was when someone asked, what is this that you're creating? And he said, it's a republic if you can keep it. And so that's kind of where we are right now, unfortunately. So with all the tainted history and the imperfections and quite frankly, the atrocities of the time and over history, I do think it's still worth fighting for. So
absolutely, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. We set the example. I was talking to a representative on the phone who I don't believe was in the United States like last week. And we actually had a real good conversation. And then he actually asked me who I voted for in the election. And I thought, ain't this being recorded? But anyway, we talked. And he said, the United States don't understand. You are in trouble. The whole world fate is in trouble. Mm-hmm. And it hit me so hard, and I said, I was in Mexico in March. Even though all the stuff was really hot then, they were still saying, Los Estados Unidos is still number one. It's the great, And I thought, I tried to check myself because I thought maybe I don't understand what I have. And I do understand what I have, but it's like you said, it's so fragile if we can keep it. But it's these little things, and now it's so corroded right now, it's tainted.
It absolutely is.
Sad.
And that's why we're here. That's why we're here.
Just to answer
so
the question.
Anybody, I'm sorry,
Can't hear you, August.
Yeah, I was saying, just for me to answer the question, so much blood has shed for this country.
Yes.
So many people's hands have worked to build this country. So many young people have died for this country, whether they went abroad to fight or civil war to fight. So it is worth living. How many Native Americans died for this country? So we have to put it in perspective. And I don't think a lot of foreigners understand because they get it from a different perspective because they're coming in and they get the rights that they couldn't do things in their country. So they see it from that perspective. But others that have been raised in the United States, and as much garbage we have put up with, whether you're a woman, you're a man, we've been through it. And you just don't do that just to be vain. You do it because you care. You do it because you want a better country for your children.
Absolutely. And that's a great segue because we hear a lot about we're in a civil war, we're heading towards civil war. I think there are a lot of young people who don't understand what that really means. And what the ramifications of that are. We are in a culture war for sure. But less than a century later, we're kind of going down the path, the promise of equality collided with the reality of division. And so the Civil War wasn't just about the states. It was about the soul of a nation. And we hear that term again now, right? The soul of a nation. And whether freedom was a privilege or a right. And we paid for that question in blood. And so we know the history of the Civil War. We know some of the players in the Civil War. And I want to just highlight what August was saying about the people who fought.
Love that movie.
The Civil War was fought in 10,000 places, from Val Verde, New Mexico, and Tullahoma, Tennessee, to St. Albans, Vermont, and Fernandina on the Florida coast. More than 3 million Americans fought in it, and over 600,000 men, 2% of the population, died in it. American homes became headquarters. American churches and schoolhouses sheltered the dying. And huge foraging armies swept across American farms and burned American towns. Americans slaughtered one another wholesale here in America, in their own cornfields and peach orchards, along familiar roads and by waters with old American names. In 2 days at Shiloh, on the banks of the Tennessee, more American men fell than in all previous American wars combined. At Cold Harbor, 7,000 Americans fell in 20 minutes. Men who had never strayed 20 miles from their own front doors now found themselves soldiers in great armies, fighting epic battles hundreds of miles from home. They knew they were making history, and it was the greatest adventure of their lives. The war made some rich, ruined others, and changed forever the lives of all who lived through it.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's just a portion. I will put the links to these documentaries.
I've watched the series. It's very
That was Ken Burns again.
Yes. Yeah.
One thing that struck me about that, and I know the Ken Burns documentaries are good, and I do want to watch that one, is this is one of the reasons why I found studying the American Revolution unrelatable is there's nothing about women. And he may talk about women later in the documentary, but I later learned as a grown-ass adult that there were all these women who participated in the Civil War, generally as nurses, but they did some heroic things. All the people
Harriet Tubman led a regiment.
Harriet Tubman was a nurse in the Civil War, and there's just so many like what's the word? Unknown people who will go unnamed who saved lives that I
Unsung
think,
heroes.
yes,
Yeah.
thank you. That's the term I was looking for. But yeah, I just wanted to say that kind of illustrates my point that we don't get the full story of the history. And if we had more of that wholeness, then I think that these stories would resonate with a lot more people. That being said, I'm still going to watch that documentary. And it's like to Jazzy's point, the fact that 600,000 people died, I think that's still one of the deadliest events in U.S. history.
It is.
And Jazzy was making that point.
It was like
Right,
50,000
Jazz, it is
at
hard
Antietam.
Yeah.
But
And
I
I can't imagine. And they had to clean that up. And I think about all that earth. I'm down here in Virginia, and I think about I was out the other day, and I seen something that said like Seminole. It was like a Seminole Indian reservation, their consulate or something. And I was thinking, man, this is where it all started, not too far from here, near Roanoke, and all this stuff started, and all these. And I thought, man, we've come a long way, but we're still teenagers. And we're in the teenager phase, whereas like the Romans, they were there for 6,000 years or something like that. And we're like 250 years old. So I want to give us a break, but we cannot let these people take us away. We just can't. I don't know how to stop it, but we're going to do everything we have to do.
We really don't know how old this country is because of the indigenous people and the Spanish Americans. We don't know how old they are. The one thing that they have done is made sure they kept separate the haves from the have-nots, and it's continued down through these 250 years. The only people they seem to want to recognize is the people with money, not the people that do most of the work. They might come up with ideas, but we come up with ideas. We come up with ideas that make companies run better, but yet we don't get the money from those ideas. If anything, we get our neighborhood burnt down and our people hung.
Yeah, the heavy lifting. But also I want to bring to the table is Lincoln's Dilemma. Please watch that as well, because it gives the other side of it for the Civil War. Lincoln's Dilemma is very deep on highlighting some of the Black African Americans that was there and what they did. Some of the Black nurses, some of the Black runners that actually got on horseback to take messages back and forth. How we fought to be a part of the fight because we were fighting for our freedom period, from tyranny. And so there's so many aspects of it, but they only highlight a third of it. And that's what Keisha, I want to speak for you, but I'm pretty sure that's what you're trying to point out.
I don't recall, do you, Kim, about the Ken Burns Civil War? I do think it gets more in depth as she goes.
Yeah, Ken Burns is known for getting to the whole story.
Yeah.
That's why he's such a renowned documentarian. So some of the things I have seen him do.
When is the show coming on?
He usually does. If you go to PBS, it has a lot of his documentaries out there. And this is, again, why it's so important to continue to support PBS. And to make sure we don't lose that precious media source.
Take the money you might spend at Amazon and spend it on PBS and NPR.
Absolutely.
You're
So here's my question on the Civil War. So when you think about the Civil War, do you see parallels in our divisions today? And what lessons did we forget from that era about reconciliation and truth?
Well, you would hope, seeing those young men laying out dead on those. I always remember going to Gettysburg. I have to share that. And there's something about Gettysburg. If you ever have a chance to visit there, you actually feel it. It really touches you. and you could, to see those young men laying out, you could see the spirit of it at Gettysburg. I don't want to see that happen again to any of our citizens.
And we've talked about this before. We need to, no one was punished after the Civil War. There was no recourse. So it was always forgiven. There was nothing done against the people who were traitors to the country. And that cannot happen again. There needs to be punishment. So once we get this orange turd out of office and his administration out of office, they need to suffer the consequences. They need to be held to account for the damage they've done to this country. There cannot be any nonsense about we need to move forward, because we've seen what happens. We have not resolved the issue. And here it is 250 years later, bubbling back up to, or not 250 years later, but here it is all these decades later, bubbling back up to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in the 6th grade, I went to Gettysburg and I went to the tomb, the unknown soldiers. I got to go see the burial ground for the unknown soldiers. That was the first time I ever went to the White House. And still today, it still fascinates me, but not fascinates me that every time Blacks gain some kind of money or some kind of place to live and we making it, that they want to burn it down. I don't know why they hate us so much. I mean, they brought us here, but they still hate us. I'm trying not to keep going on that subject, but it's hard.
They're afraid of us, is what they are. We had 12 years of Reconstruction where we were doing well. We had legislators, we had educated Black people in Congress and in government. And like you said, they decided, nope, can't have this, can't have them doing well. They're inferior to us, so let's burn it all down to the ground.
And that's what's going on now.
Well, and then they turned around and, like Keisha said, they gave slave owners reparations for losing their property, but never fulfilled the promise of 40 acres and a mule
to the slaves,
to the freed
300
African slaves. And it's the same. It's just the same thing that's been going on for decades and decades and decades, for over a century.
I want my mule.
I want my 40 acres.
I want my 40 acres. They can keep the mule.
Yeah,
but anyway,
from that.
But
and milk.
Yeah. If we're the question I was trying to figure out how to answer that question, because I'm wondering if we really learned any lessons to forget. Did we ever learn any lessons? Because there was never any repercussions.
Well, we never got what was rightfully ours. So no, there was no lesson learned. The lesson they only got is that to keep doing it, do what they said. This has been going on for hundreds of years, to how to keep the Black people down and not attaining wealth. And even looking at the future, a lot of these million and billionaires now, they're creating robots to work in the warehouses and to do they can talk on the phone. I can answer your questions. I can speak. I can understand you, is what they say. And eventually a lot of us are going to be out of work, and it's not going to be just Black people, because like they said, if they come for one, like they started out with the Mexicans, and now just any brown skinned country, and now they coming for us. Who's next?
Well, hopefully the lesson learned is that there were no lessons learned, and that this time around, as Keisha says, there will be a reckoning, there will be repercussions for everything that has happened. Otherwise, this is just going to keep recycling.
It is, because they just keep rewriting history so that the next generation, or generation that comes 50, 75 years from now, they don't remember it.
And a lot of people died.
A lot of people died, and families are fighting each other. The MAGA has divided families to the point where people are not talking to large swaths of their family and friends over nonsense.
Over a lot. It's really not nonsense.
I mean, it's not nonsense, but I mean, I think the nonsense I'm referring to is really what the MAGA people are holding on to.
Well, and that's the division, right? This is part of the authoritarian playbook that we're also dealing with, and we'll talk about that when we get to World War II. But the next segment and what we've gone through in this country, it was a time where despair really was the enemy. So the Great Depression stripped away comfort, certainty, but not courage. So in breadlines and work camps, Americans found something deeper, the strength to rebuild together. And it was interesting. I read a fact when I was just going down memory lane and reviewing my history, is that a lot of people lived longer during the Depression, lived longer going through that time, which is interesting. I'd like to do more research on that to find out why, but obviously billions lost as the stock crashes. But look at Senate Farm Bloc starts battle for higher tariffs. Well, remember that tariffs were a big part of what happened and was a precursor to the Depression. So
I can talk about my family. I mean, I didn't go through the Depression, but hearing my grandfather tell his stories and my dad, families really bonded together. That's what helped people survive. And others were helping others. I know my grandfather worked on a dairy farm, a man who owned the farm in Northern California. We called him Buttercup. He was like another grandfather, great-great-grandfather. And it was tenacity. And these people stuck together. They cared about each other. It was a terrible time, of course, but that's just my story. I mean, I feel that's what kept people together during that time. And my dad grew up in Texas, and another really close family there that helped each other out. Just to share that from my perspective. But it was a terrible time, and we're scared.
I saw a couple of things like this. I know 3 trades. I speak 3 languages. I fought for 3 years. I had 3 children and no work for 3 months, but I only want one job. This one's heartbreaking.
Yeah, that is, yeah.
People couldn't afford to take care of their children. So, I mean, we all probably know more about the Depression, or do we? Than a lot of other times in history, because a lot of that has come back around now because of what's happening to our economy. The dollar continues to drop. If anybody has been watching that trend, it's not good. So my question on this area, and I want to show, actually, you know what? Let me show this first, because FDR came in during this time. If we remember, and a lot of good came out of that.
Long lines for food, for relief, fear and despair. Though black and white, the pictures from the Great Depression echo America in the COVID era. National suffering and frustration. The virus is new, the struggle is not.
Our greatest primary task is to put people to work.
In 1933, newly elected Franklin Delano Roosevelt confronted 25% unemployment, the collapse of banking, and sweeping poverty. His response would reshape the way the country thought about itself, its president, and democracy.
The United States was in the fetal position, and people really wondered whether we would ever get out of this.
Jonathan Alter is author of The Defining Moment, FDR's 100 Days and the Triumph of Hope. We spoke inside the Manhattan home where Roosevelt slept the night he learned that he had won the presidency.
Roosevelt believed in what he called action and action now.
This nation is asking for action and action now.
And he used that word in his inaugural address 6 times. It actually got more applause than the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
While Roosevelt was ready for action, he had to make sure the country was too. At a time when the tenets of democracy itself were being questioned, he recast the social contract, convincing the American public they were all in it together.
What is the New Deal? It's a deal between the government and the people on what they expect of one another. And before Roosevelt was president, it was basically every man for himself. Rugged individualism, you know.
The only real contact the American people had with the federal government was when they went to the post office to buy a stamp. Roosevelt changed all of that.
He changed it by offering information and hope, says professor and historian David Woolner at the Roosevelt family estate in Hyde Park, New York.
People would gather around their radios and they would listen to their president explain what the government was trying to do. And this was very, very reassuring.
The famous fireside chats were few in number, but were symbolic of a connection between the patrician Roosevelt and those suffering with poverty. Something the president understood because he had suffered, says Susan Dunn, a Roosevelt scholar at Williams College.
I would say that the symbol of his presidency, of his life, is Warm Springs, Georgia.
Roosevelt was stricken with polio in 1921. He never walked again. During his recovery, he built a facility in Warm Springs, Georgia for other polio sufferers and took charge of its operation.
And it helped him to relate to all kinds of people. That's leading a life of kindness, of respect, of responsibility for the people we know, as well as for the people we don't know. That's what a real democracy requires. That's the moral basis of democracy.
With the country's support for his spirit of experimentation, Roosevelt unleashed a flock of programs.
They went to work building the infrastructure of this country in ways that are almost unimaginable now. They built 39,000 schools, 2,500 hospitals, more than 300 airports, 800 state parks.
The Hoover Dam, the Lincoln Tunnel, the Tennessee Valley Authority, among the many major projects created with a Congress willing to work with the president. That didn't mean Roosevelt was without enemies.
I think there's a kind of an assumption that everything for him worked, but he had very, very strong opposition. There was plenty of partisanship, and there were plenty of Republicans and some Democrats who thought that he was becoming a dictator.
Soon enough, Roosevelt would be fighting real dictators in the Second World War, which ultimately lifted the country out of the Depression. America became a beacon for the world, and its leader, Roosevelt, offered a new way to measure the worth of a nation.
And he said, you know, the test of our progress is not whether we provide much to those who have much, but whether we provide enough to those who have too little.
That is the test posed by FDR for America's leaders today. Not just to survive, but to plot a course for a way to emerge from this crisis stronger.
Yeah. So the question here is, what do you think helped Americans pull together during the Depression? And do you see that same sense of community anywhere in America today?
Oh.
At that time, the church, you know, the church was stronger, and they're not as strong today. And we don't even go out and meet our neighbors like we used to. You know, it's like our neighbors are our enemies, and so, you know, it's scary.
I think desperation will do it too. If you feel like you have nothing left to lose, you got to band with the people who you have and hope that the person that you vote to be in charge has the answers. People that you put in charge. And no, I do not feel like we are anywhere near as united. I also wanted to say that Jazzy said that we need another FDR, and I still feel like Joe Biden had elements of FDR about him and his presidency, because a lot of the stuff that FDR didn't really pay dividends for a while. It wasn't like he implemented Social Security and people were the next day like, this is an amazing program. Wow, I can retire with all this money. It took decades for us to see the benefits of Social Security. And I think about the infrastructure bill that was passed that is not a sexy bill, but all the things in it are things that 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, people are going to be saying, wow, that was some bill. But FDR had 4 terms to show that he could make things happen. Joe Biden got 4 years.
Yeah, great point, Keisha. Great point.
And only if we had Kamala, we wouldn't be talking like this today, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. Can you go back to that last comment? I agree. At least he was a president, like most our presidents, right? Pinitra, were presidents for the country, not just their party, or not even their party, their followers.
I don't even know if he for his followers, because the way they talk about him on other stations is that he only cares about the ones with money, just like going to Saudi Arabia right now, and they're going to build hotels over there for his son-in-law, and they're going to, with Trump Towers, and they're going to have the golf courses over there. And, you know, he's not concerned with broke people. He could care less about people with no money.
Yeah, I agree. So in staying with FDR, obviously, it took us to World War II, right? So when the world faced tyranny, Americans stood shoulder to shoulder, not because we were united in opinion, but because we were united in principle. And that generation understood the cost of silence, and they chose to act. So we all know some of the comparisons people have made to World War II, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about him. So he was president during this time, and we know about the Great New Deal and everything, so we've already talked about that. But this was a time, this is interesting, because we talk a lot about, or I do in media psychology, about propaganda during that time. And it's interesting, there was still propaganda during that time, quite a bit of it. And I think today we would look at it more as advertising. But I thought this was interesting, and I wanted to pull this up. This is a website that does World War II posters and prints. And these are what are called propaganda posters. So it's interesting to go back in time, right? Because it gives you a little bit of insight into the culture, what was going on at the time. So we know that we can do it. We know a lot of women were instrumental in World War II. Men who know say no to prostitutes. Interesting. Healthy skin keeps him on the job. We've got women on the poster for the Marine Corps. Nurses are needed. These all look just like advertisements, right? Here, don't be a sucker, keep your mouth shut. I thought that was interesting. Are you doing all you can? Here's one, an orderly line is a safe line. He's watching you. So I thought these were kind of interesting posters to kind of look at, to give insight into what was going on at that time. But the main thing I think we all remember and what we all talk about today in relative to what's happening to our country and what happened during World War II. And luckily, he was defeated at that time. But I pulled this up. I thought it was interesting comment made. See if I have the right area. I think so. Let's see.
The other countries. And so this rankled.
Let me go back just a little bit.
That the provisions were unnecessarily draconian, both the loss of territory and also these massive war reparations. And what the Versailles Treaty did in effect is blame Germany for the First World War, whereas many Germans felt that actually they were no more responsible than any of the other countries. And so this rankled.
Hitler correctly diagnoses that the Germans are suffering a great deal of political and economic insecurity. What they need most of all is a sense of unity and a sense of economic security. It's kind of a floor underneath them. And the Nazis provide this by talking about, state intervention in all sorts of areas to create employment, building the Autobahns, things like that.
Hitlers Herrschaft ist in den ersten Jahren aus der Sicht der meisten Deutschen eine Erfolgsgeschichte. Hitler gelingt es nach und nach, die Vorschriften des Versailler Vertrages außer Kraft zu setzen.
Yeah, let me go. There were a lot of, I don't want to play the whole thing, but there were a lot of parallels. And we all know that. There are a lot of parallels. And to what he took advantage of during that time as a populist leader. And so we are definitely experiencing the same things. So I don't like showing Hitler a lot. it's disheartening. But just for World War II, we are facing a moral crisis like this today. And not yet with weapons, but with truth and lack of it. And the fact that democracy this is a fine line. So do we think that we find the same unity and purpose as we did in World War II? Or do we have to go to war to find it?
That's a good question. I think there actually is a unity of purpose for all who want to save our democracy. We're all like-minded. We all want the same thing. We do not want our democracy to crumble. I think I don't feel it. I don't feel like we're unified as a nation. We may all have the same goal, but I just don't feel that true spirit of unity and community. I just don't feel that.
Yeah, I would agree. And sometimes it takes something like a 9/11, which we're going to talk about in a minute, that has a tendency to create more unity. I'm not even sure if that would work now.
No, I mean, COVID, just like they were correlating a lot of things that went on with COVID with the depression. But I believe that COVID divided us even more. It wasn't like we came together as a nation. That was the first time that I saw people just being so silly over this, wear a mask or don't wear a mask. We started flinging names back and forth at one another. So instead of being unified, it divided us. It was a tragedy for our nation, but it divided us.
But again, look at who our leader was.
Exactly.
Not a unifier.
Yeah. I think it's all dependent upon the leadership of the nation at the time.
Definitely.
God, that man is trash.
And I think 9/11, the only group of people that got together was in New York.
Oh no, that was nationwide.
You know, I'm saying I didn't feel no closer to, because I wasn't in New York. I didn't feel no closer to my fellow Americans where I was than the people seemed like to in New York. To me, they really came together.
Yeah, I experienced something different where I was. There was definitely a unification. There was just a sense that we were all, you know, citizens of these United States of America, and that whatever temporarily divided us, we came together as a nation. I felt that.
I did too. I was in LA at the time, and I felt it. I even like George Bush for a hot minute.
Exactly. But you know, I did not agree with any of that man's policies, but he knew how to unify the nation. He spoke comfort to his citizens, and that made a huge difference. Leadership makes a difference.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Well,
And 100%.
I don't know if it was because I was in Las Vegas and I always felt like people in Las Vegas look out for themselves.
So, agreed. But we have seen what happens when people pull together for a cause, right? So we're heading into the civil rights movement and how people came together there by, of course, a great leader. So let's just take I pulled a little short clip out of this.
The valley of despair. I say to you today, my friend, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Pretty powerful, and I'm sure we all know the speech. That's a movement, was a powerful movement. Obviously, there were disasters and heartbreak within that as well. But I think my question is, what does it mean to you to be a patriotic dissenter? And how can speaking up or refusing to stay silent be one of the most American acts of all? And remember Miss Rosa Parks. So what can we learn, I think, from this time in our history?
I think it's the ultimate act of patriotism to dissent. That's what the nation was founded on, a revolution, saying no to tyranny. And we find ourselves back in that space right now, where you almost see them trying to legislate us back into Jim Crow. And it's frightening. It really is. It's frightening and it's maddening. And there will have to be another movement, probably even bigger than that one, to overcome what's coming at us now.
They even sent out text messages, to Black people saying that they're going to go back out in the fields. I don't know if anybody was aware of all those text messages that were going out to Black people. And
it was going out to students, to children. That's what makes it even worse.
Two of my cousins in Louisiana got those text messages that the bus was coming to get them. Be ready. Yeah.
So It just what I don't understand. I don't know. The man told everyone what he was going to do, and nobody believed. I mean, they believed. They said the food price is gonna go down, but he didn't sign them checks. He didn't sign those checks, those stimulus checks. He just put his name on them to fool people. I didn't know so many people could get fooled so easily.
Yeah, that's a real problem. Education in this country, once again, needs to be better. And two, nobody who is a multiple time over felon should be able to be president. There's no way in hell that should ever happen. Never again.
That's what I said. But they're making sure that the people are stupid. They want us stupid. They want you not to study.
I go back in time, as you all know. I was in college and high school in the 60s. We're going backwards, way backwards. It was so exciting then to be a college student in high school, and the activism, and it was encouraged. And I don't understand some of the young people in these colleges now, especially the young white men. What is wrong? Something's missing. They don't care. They don't care about human beings. And they believe everything that Trump says. I'm not putting them all in one. They're not all like that, but there's a big majority.
It's enough of them.
Yeah, and it's so backwards. That's when we got Medicare. That's when we got so many things were put in place at that time. Roe versus Wade. Now everything's being taken away, and I didn't realize it could ever happen like that.
I never thought women would lose their rights, to make choices for their own body.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's nuts. Well, let's come to a point where we just mentioned it earlier, where there was a time where we did come together, and maybe not everybody felt it, but in our darkest hours, we did remember who we were. So after the towers fell, strangers became neighbors, fear gave way, if only for a moment, to unity. And it really showed us what we could be if we didn't forget. And the unfortunate thing is that we do forget. We forget all the lives that were lost that day. We honor it once a year now, but it seems like we trample all over it with the way we treat each other today. We didn't learn the lesson about unity in this, but we did come together. So why do you think moments of unity fade so quickly after a tragedy? And how can we keep compassion alive without needing a crisis or a war to remind us?
It has to be authentic and not superficial. It's an illusion. We're not unified. We come together during a tragedy, but there's still ingrained in so many of us a hatred for the other. And if it's not authentic, if it's not real, it's not sustainable. And I think that's why we have these moments, these snippets in time when we come together as a nation, but we don't really feel it. It's not real. It's like you can only fake things for so long.
Well, it's just like this. I'm sorry. I just don't want to forget my thoughts. Old people be forgetting.
Go ahead,
Andrea. Old people be forgetting.
Speak. Go ahead.
I wanted to remember to say, because it came across my brain more than once tonight, is that they had Hegseth come out to the news, where they have the meetings and stuff, and they wanted them to sign the paper saying that they would not release any information unless they saw it first, and they said it got an okay from the White House that it was okay to release that information. And so he again, this autocracy that he's trying to create in the United States, as long as they control the narrative, the truth won't get out to people. We won't know, we'll get the message that they hate us and you hate me and or whatever. And so it's just hard to get the message out when one person is controlling it.
Absolutely. And that because the battlefield has changed in that, right? Today, the fight isn't with armies, at least not yet. It's with the algorithms, it's the propaganda, it's the lies. So the new war for democracy is fought through words and screens and narratives and grabbing attention and outrage. And thing is, how do we continue to have that courage to fight for truth?
Well, I mean, we're watching our leaders not be, they're afraid to speak up. And something that I have never seen, ABC, NBC, CBS, and CNN, and MS, they paying out millions of dollars to get silence.
Yeah. 100%, Linda. Can you throw that back up? I'm going to read that. When the military stand up for democracy. Yeah, we've said that before. When the military stands up, when the military won't follow unlawful orders, and when the military is on the side of the people, which they've taken an oath to be. So to wrap this, before we go to our final segment with August, we are being called, right? So as we've looked kind of past in the history, every generation faces a moment that asks, who are we really? We've fought, we've rebuilt, we've risen before. Can we do it again? Because really, if we look at America, it's not the buildings or the monuments. If we, look at the towers and all that, a lot of people died in that. A lot of lives were shattered in that. And so the American dream, or America, actually lives in us. And I think it's up to us, we the people, to try to keep that alive, which is what we try to do here. So we'll tail this into talking about the protests this weekend, because that's really, really important. However, we haven't talked about any news today, right? So that was on purpose, except for our final segment with August on the Move.
Yes,
and
I am.
So I am going to turn it over to Miss August.
Yes, I am. I'm on the move with the latest news. Today is Wednesday, October 15th, and here's your latest news. We really want to give remembrance to D'Angelo, 51 years old. He has gone home to heaven. And also remembering Diane Keaton at 79. So we just want to make sure we call these people out, because they have lived a full life and they have provided us with their service. I remember D'Angelo when he took off his shirt and showed me his abs. I don't know about you guys if you saw the photo, but I did. And Diane Keaton, back in the day when I first saw The Godfather, I thought The Godfather was, whoa, with the horse head in the bed, she marrying Tony. So, yeah, Diane Keaton, you get props today. Let's talk about Bad Bunny and the Super Bowl. MAGA, listen up. Bad Bunny is Puerto Rican, but he's an American. What are you fussing about? Come on, people, wake up. Congratulations to the Los Angeles Ace for the WNBA champions. We have to give those ladies a congrats, because they are now three-peat winners. So let's put our hands together for our WNBA champions, the Las Vegas Ace. Also, thanks, Kim. Back in May, not of this year, of 2020, 09. Something that happened I want to bring to your attention, and please, if you get a chance, make sure you look it up, because it was really, this is what's happening today. In Oklahoma, a cop choked a paramedic while trying to save someone's life. It is starting to happen again. And the cop, he got off, he only got 5 days suspension, and he went back to work. Listen up, people. Whenever you get a chance, look into the story. I think you need to be educated in that. FYI, I'm not sure if everybody is noticing that there's a lot of plane crashes happening. Why? Because the regulatory have been suspended. Please, when you book your flights, ask the questions. Find out. See if the airport you're going into, if they do have traffic controllers. Because not only small planes, but big planes as well are feeling the tension, the heat, and also feeling left out there. Who wants to work and you're not getting paid? You're not going to put 100% in. That's why a lot of the air traffic controllers are calling in sick. Also, I want to bring your attention to, he always plays himself. So if you think he's not in those Epstein files, Trump allegedly, we must say that, groped the Italian PM when she was talking to him. And also, you know, he had to make a nice comment about the press secretary. I hate calling her name, but
Was that today?
Yes. Well, when he was out there, he started talking about her lips and everything like that. You think he's not a pervert? Well, let's go into Washington and go down dirty. The young Republicans are showing their true ass. They're texting how they really feel, what they want to do to people, how they want to do it to people, and if given the chance, how nasty they can be. We got to call them out. It's 7 of them. And if you want to see their faces, you could go to Roland Martin and you'll see their faces. Call them out. Make sure you keep their names close. Just like how we talk about ICE, we need to get their names, call them out, because they think they could slither back under the rock when all this is over. No, you're going to have to pay for this. Let's continue with the story. Also, with those 7 Republican parents, I'm just going to turn to you and ask you, please talk to your children. Find out what they're thinking. Find out how they feel. Because only you can help them out here in these streets. Please, parents, have a conversation. They already talked about our grand wizard, Pete Hegseth, trying to do press roles. But I'm proud of the press, because the press saying no. They're finally pushing back. Maybe they're waking up. If they won't sign this, maybe they're standing up and standing at attention and realizing that they're being painted in a box. We also got to give congratulations to Jack Smith. He broke his silence. And he had a conversation with Andrew Weissman. He said it reeks, I quote, of due process and lack of. So he knows that people are not getting due process. And to round it out, we're also going to talk about, I want to call out Janet Mills of Maryland. She is the governor currently, and she's running for a Senate seat. Yes, she is 76 years old, and we do want younger people to run. However, she was the governor that stood up to Trump and in February, and also told him that, listen, no, we want our money. And he said, well, we're going to hold back that funding. And guess what she did? She sued him and she won. So please look into the stories that I'm telling you and make sure you know. And finally, I just only want you to realize that the judge has temporarily blocked the move to fire federal employees during shutdown. So it can happen. But they don't listen to the judges and they do whatever they want. But just note that the judge gave a temporary block on firing federal employees. So please note of that. I want to close with the final note. Keep watering yourself. This is a quote. And I want you to keep watering yourself. I want you to water it with good thoughts, good people, patience, empathy, healing, hope, open mind, kind words, self-belief, acceptance, and most of all, joy. Thank you. And that's from August on the Moon. Back over to you, Kim.
Great, August. Thanks for all the updates. Ooh. Yeah, the media saying, hell no, Hegseth. Hell no, we're not doing that bullshit. That was finally good to hear. Good to hear. So everybody, this weekend, Saturday, October 18th, find a protest near you. If you can go out, if you don't, join us here online. We will cover a few around the country as much as we can. If we can't show them live, we will record them and upload some videos later on. So please, 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 please join us. And before I have a couple final words, does anybody else have some final words that they would like to convey? No.
One person can make a difference.
One person can make a difference. Can make a difference. And remember, it's we the people. We the people. This country is absolutely worth fighting for, even with its tainted past and some atrocities, absolutely, and we all know that. We all know that. So how do we make it better, right? We can't make it better under an authoritarian. This is a republic if we can keep it. So we have to remember that. And we'll be here fighting every day. We're not going anywhere. Like I said, we're average people just having a conversation, sharing some information, and standing up for democracy. So thank you guys for joining us. Please like, subscribe if you're new to our channel. Share this so we can grow this channel and get more information out to everybody and have everybody join us. But Saturday, be there. Remember the old saying, Maureen, be there or be square. That was, no. Be there or be square.
Unite.
Hey, younger people be knowing too. We know that.
And thank you. Thanks, Linda, for joining. Thanks, Jazzy.
Thanks,
everybody.
Money. Everybody I didn't
join
mention.
us. Yeah, Friday did we get everybody? Did we mention everybody? So Friday is our round table, right? And then next Tuesday for Here's the Thing with Keisha. So we have lots more content coming. All right, guys, hang in there. Hang in there. Don't give up hope. We'll see you Friday.
All right.
We the people unite.